everybody, this is a very important author. Monty Helfgott has been working with us and letting us share his books now for months and months and years. And he keeps coming up with something that's extraordinary and exciting and science fiction a little bit, but always love stories. So the latest one's a novel, and it's called Eternal Patrol. So when you first look at it, you say, gee, what is that? Well, it's a submarine. It looks like there are fireworks there. And then there's a little emblem, something. So he'll tell you about that when I ask him something. So how long was this in your mind, Monty, before you actually put it to paper?
I would say, I mean, until I finished the entire story or until I began?
No, well, you were thinking about even writing it.
Oh, actually, it was very quick after after I read the article about the Confederate submarine and what happened to it during the Civil War. I would say about a week later, it began to percolate in my mind, thinking, wow, well, this is really interesting. What if I wrote a story about a World War II submarine and the men that are on it? And then, it grows. It just expands. And I would say I started the actual work maybe 3 to 4 weeks after I decided that this would be a great novel. I'd be able to tell a lot of people a lot of things within this novel. And actually, I have 2 quotes. One from Stephen King, which fits in just with what I just said. Stories have something to say. They matter. They help us understand both ourselves and the world we inhabit. So I have messages inside all my stories. They come from, my thoughts, my heart, and I want to share it with people. And how better to do that, aside from a discussion, is to put it in a book. Now, the second quote is from Dr. Albert Einstein, who said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. It is limitless. And I believe that in your mind.
Yes.
And you'll see in the book, it is limitless.
Well, you have been actually, besides being an author, of course, you're an educational psychologist, and you've been in a lot of fields. But one thing you've been doing since you've retired, I don't think you've really retired, you've just changed the things you do. You had all sorts of groups. You've had writing groups, you've had memoir groups, you've had TV groups. You're trying to do other things to help people with their imagination. Now, are a lot of them frozen the way they are, or do you find some with great imagination?
It varies. Everyone has their own abilities. I've always told all the people that I work with in groups, writing groups, memoir groups, that writing is one of the most difficult tasks you could ever engage in. And there are many reasons for it. You really have to stick with it. And some people can do it and some people can't. It just doesn't happen. As I've explained to a lot of people that, that you write, you put a book together, it gets published. It takes a lot of training. When I did my doctoral dissertation, I had to stick with it. I had to be consistent or it never would have happened. And that was a training, and that's lasted over 40 years and is now morphed into my writing.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's right. It's called discipline. And you are very disciplined, but you're very friendly disciplined. And I know some of the writers who you've actually influenced, and we've actually interviewed them also. Not everybody has a great story to tell, but yet if they have a great imagination, they can make it into a great story. Because you were never on a submarine, but you imagined it. Did you used to ride motorcycles?
How did I find out about the submarine?
No. You didn't know. I said that you never were
No,
on a
I've never
submarine.
been,
Oh,
I've
and
never,
also, did you ever ride motorcycles?
yes, that I did.
Oh, so
I
you knew a
did,
little bit about that.
and then I quit after my accident, which was not terrible, but I had my wife on the back, and we were on Block Island, and I won't go into it, but neither of us really got very hurt at all. But after that, I said goodbye to the motorcycle.
So
I said
that was
I'm getting
interesting because that's
a
part of
normal
the
car to ride around in.
book. But the submarine, tackling something that you were never on, and of course you knew my husband wrote a book called, it was um, the story of B-17s and but he was on a B-17, so he had knowledge, even though it was a novel. But for you to write, you had to do an awful lot of research, didn't you?
Absolutely. A huge amount of research, reading journals of men who served on submarines and seeing what it was like. I did have one person actually in the community that I live in right now he didn't serve on a submarine, but he was part of the submarine um, uh, action. He was a support person. So I spoke with him. So that was the only other form of information that I received. The rest of it, you look on the internet and you get a lot of information, but you also then use your imagination, your fantasy capacity, and you can come up with a lot of different things. Stephen King said the same thing. He said, I described walking into a bar that I remember, and if I can't remember everything, I just use my imagination and create it myself. So that's a psychological tool that you have. It's called fantasy capacity, an ability to see things, and then but that's what you do when you write. I always see the scene and then I write it as slowly. It's like I'm watching a movie. And whether other writers do that or not, I don't know, but it helps me tremendously.
Yeah, and you write so well, and so you make it all come alive. That's the most important thing. And I've told you this before, your characters are very real. And that's why we can enjoy it, because it's like you've dropped us into the story, the book.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Anita, because your characters have to be realistic. They can't be stiff like a mannequin. You have to give them positive aspects, negative aspects, and their interactions with other people have to be realistic. And my background in psychology certainly helped me in that manner. So when I've had other people, who have read the book, they said, your characters are very real. I can connect with them. A lot of women that read my book said, "Oh, this sounds just like the main character, someone I wish I had met, someone that is really connected." And I said, it's not a man's book totally, and it's not a woman's book totally. It's both. Takes into account the men and women, especially, of course, the romantic aspect is the interaction between these two young people. And then when you have the main character on the submarine and what their interaction and fighting during World War II in the Pacific, you get the real hard-nosed view of what real battle is like, especially on a submarine. I could never serve on a submarine. I think I have a little bit of claustrophobia, but these
Right.
guys do it. And I describe very detailed the horrors of living on a submarine, not just the fighting, but the living. But
Well,
let me go
let
ahead.
me put your psychologist training there. Do you know if before someone signs up, if they have to pass some sort of a test to be able to go on a submarine? I mean, these are questions that are put forward to them.
Absolutely. To get on a submarine, you have to go through a whole list of
Mm.
the physical. There's physical exams that I found out about, psychological exams, ability to work at a specific job on the submarine, whether it's a loader of torpedoes or navigation. And as you will see in the book, the final review is an interview with the captain of the submarine, and he puts you through a lot of hell to make sure that you are going to survive and do your job on the submarine.
Yeah, I'm sure that's very important. And did you said that you did get to interview some people who were on submarines, just one person or a few people or what?
No, it was just one person that I knew, but he really didn't serve on the submarine. He
Uh,
was just a support person at the sub base in New Haven, Connecticut, where they launched. I think they're still in operation, but that's the main submarine base during World War II. So the big test, the job was to really find out what it was all about, and that was the research.
yeah. And they are making submarines, of course, bigger and better with faster. And I mean, have you been on any of them since you wrote that book?
I did visit New London, Connecticut, but I think it was just one of the old World War II submarines. I went up there with my son and showed him around. I never really got on any of the nuclear submarines, which I know they're like phenomenal. They're big and they're comfortable, and the food is a hell of a lot better than than during World War II. But
Sure.
that's about it. But you know what? When you do a lot of research, you get into it, you get the feel of what it's about, and it allows you to write in a more realistic manner.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I want to show you, this is the cover, everyone. He's won an award. His graphic designer won an award for this. And then I'll show you the back of the book. And people can, this is, it's a fast read, but it's very intense. I will warn you. It's something you want to take for a weekend if you go away and read it. It's very exciting, I must say. And it's called Eternal Patrol, and it's by my guest, Monty Helfgott. So they would get that on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can get it in a Kindle version or a soft cover version. It's a fast read, about 180 pages, and the front cover was designed by someone who's done all my front covers, a phenomenal graphic artist, John Wyman. And he and I, he's up in New Jersey, and I consult with him down here in Florida. And he reads the whole book first, the script, before he does anything. He has to get the feel for it. So, and that's why he's won so many awards.
And what made you use I want to call it's like an emblem. It's like a locket. What brought that in? What made that so important?
That locket is a symbol. If you open a locket, what happens? It opens up to two sides, right? And you have a portrait picture of one person and a portrait of the other. So you had the male and the female who became lovers and fell in love. And then when you close it, it's like an eternal symbol. They're close to each other. That was the idea.
Right.
And he wore it. The main character wore the locket around his neck, keeping his love close to him.
Yeah.
And let me just tell you something. Just a couple of weeks ago, I found out in an article in one of the magazines I get that the same thing actually happened in real life. That a locket was used by, I don't know if it was Army or Air Force or Navy, but the exact same thing. And I said, "Oh my God, look at this!" And I sent the article to my graphic artist to say, "This is such a coincidence. You never know."
And I've always said, Monty, nothing is new. Nothing's been invented new. It's always been there. You know, when you travel and you go back to, Egypt, Greece, and
Yeah,
there's so many things that oh yeah, like all the literature and all this stuff. So it's like history, that word history repeating itself, really.
absolutely right. You just have to recognize it. You have to see the past in some way, or if you read about it, or you can imagine it, or you see it in a film or a movie, that helps you get a much better grasp of the world and the history that has determined so many things in our life today. You remember what Santayana said, those who, the Spanish philosopher, those who forget about, I'm not quoting it correctly, but those who forget about the past are doomed to repeat it, if there's
Yes.
something really bad. So you got to keep that in mind. You have to know things about history and the connection, the connectivity is so important. Um, so
I do have a question. I don't remember. Maybe I need to go back and read it. What uniforms do they wear when they're in the submarine? Did
they
you write
really
about that?
didn't.
Did
They
I miss
didn't
it?
wear a uniform. They were dressed in clothes that were as comfortable as possible. It just maybe a shirt and sometimes a pair of shorts or long pants, because it was hot, gritty, difficult, and dangerous. So only when they went on shore for leave did they have an actual naval uniform.
But they had air conditioning down there, didn't they? What kept them cool?
No, there was no air conditioning. There was no air conditioning. They
Wow.
they they couldn't wait to surface during the darkness of the morning so that they can get out of the submarine and feel the fresh air on their face. And the air that circulated through the submarine would diminish over time. And they knew that if they couldn't light a cigarette because there was an inadequate amount of oxygen, the submarine had to find a way to surface and regenerate the oxygen for the submarine. So
See, I hadn't. I guess I was that in there, and I missed it. I was just thinking about it.
yeah, I mean, the difficulties, the horrors that they went through, I don't think we really have ever thought about. It's just like, I mean, so many people in my own family who've fought in various wars, especially World War II, they never talk about it. They
No,
never want to
no,
discuss it.
I don't know any submarine heroes. I mean, somehow I don't know why. It just your book opened up a lot for me that I hadn't even thought about before. We always think about the bombers, or we think about, even the soldiers, the army, and even the Navy on the ships, but not the submarines for some reason.
Yeah, that's why they call it the silent service. The silent service, because you don't hear that much about them. And I think there were 350 submarines during World War II that never came back. And you know why most of them
Really?
didn't come back? Some of them were destroyed by the Japanese, the bombs that they sent on top of them. But most of them, and I bring
Yeah.
this out in the novel, most of the submarines, there were faulty torpedoes that either exploded prematurely or went back toward the submarine and blew them up.
Oh,
And
heavens, I know. And
nobody talked about. I just saw an article actually recently in one of the magazines I read. It's called the World War II magazine. Exactly to that point, these torpedoes, which weighed 630 pounds, were faulty. Many of them were faulty and caused the death and destruction of a good number of the submarines. I don't know what the numbers are, but that's what I read, in my research.
And the Japanese, did they have the largest fleet, or the Germans had the largest fleet, didn't they?
I'm not sure. I don't think the Japanese had a big fleet of
Oh,
submarines. I know the Germans did, the
yeah.
U-boats. Um, uh, I don't know if they had as many as the Americans, or maybe they did, because they used their submarines phenomenally to destroy shipping up and down the east coast of the United States. And you probably know that the intracoastal was built because ships had to go from Florida up to the northern states without being destroyed by the Nazi submarines.
Yeah, you
That's
told us
why
that,
they
I
did
think,
it
on one of
today.
our last interviews. It was interesting. I had never known that. I just thought they did it because it was a better way to go, since you didn't have to deal with the ocean. But there was a real reason why that, and that was done
Absolutely.
because of this?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the main reason for dredging that. I don't know if it was a river or maybe it wasn't at all, but it turned into the intracoastal. And when I drive up A1A, it's so beautiful to see it on the left or the right side, and based
Right.
on how you're driving, it's absolutely beautiful. I want to mention that there are a couple of ideas that I want to express that come up in the book. One of them has to do with um, the intensity of love that can blossom during a short period of time. And if the intensity of this relationship, which you'll see in the book, which was 2 weeks, was substantive, could it be eternal? And that's all I'm going to say. Eternal, which means forever,
Right.
ever. And also touching on the meaning of life, life, death, and immortality, because I bring up the aspect of an alternative universe. Everyone's thinks about it from time to time. Most of us suppress it. What happens to us afterwards? We don't really know, but you'll see what I think of it, when you read the book. But the submarine was a symbol. I use the submarine as a symbol, an allegory for the world, because we're all in the same boat, so to speak. And how people interact with each other, how nations interact with each other, determines the outlook. And so the submarine is a symbolic aspect to take a look at, and you'll see how the men interact, how they fight together against the enemy, how they fight with themselves, how they deal with death all the time. All of these things are allegorical, and I wanted to bring that across. It's a miniature world, really. It's a miniature world. I wonder if the Beatles had that in their mind when they wrote the
That's
Yellow Submarine. I don't know.
that's funny. The Beatles, right? Well, I just want to be, because we've run out of time. Eternal Patrol, Monty Helfgott. And I have to tell you what's lovely. When you read a book and you get to meet the author and you get to hear him and how he's done it, I think it makes it a much better book. So you'll want to read the book now, because now you'll be able to see Monty in that book and why he did it and how he thought about it. He's a very talented writer. And you just go to Amazon and go to Eternal Patrol and buy the book. It's not very large, but it's a very large story, and I know I loved it. And it's for those of you like sci-fi, but also you're gonna love this book. Thank you, Monty, so much.
Thank you, Anita. Wonderful talking with you again.
Always, always. Thank you, Monty.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.